The nature of injustice is such that it is not quantified by the numbers of people who are affected, in my view. Injustice is something that happens to individuals. Individuals suffer injustice, perhaps groups of individuals, but they are individuals. I think that our society recognizes that individuals matter.
Attorney John Kirkland took up the Aleut's cause in 1978.
This is vandalism by U.S. forces. So we're recommending that compensation, a lump sum amount, be
retained by the Aleutian-Pribilof Islands Association. He would prove an effective ally in a historic campaign to seek reparations from the U.S. government.
Be used to rehabilitate churches and church properties from the maintenance of Aleut cemeteries remote from the villages, such as Funter Bay. We went through literally thousands of documents in scores of boxes, just focused on this period. Letters, logs, Western Union telegrams, minutes of meetings that established fundamentally the case for the Aleut people to show the injustices that they had suffered.
A decorated military veteran, Kirtland shared the Aleut's view that America could have done better.
In many ways, there was a humanitarian impulse for the removal of the Aleuts, but there was an abysmal bureaucratic failure in terms of the duty to care for the Aleuts once they had been removed from their homes and relocated to these camps. We don't have, I don't believe, an absolutely accurate enumeration of those who passed away. But we do know that at least 10% died while they were in the camps in the government's care. That mortality rate was shocking.
Japanese Americans interned during World War II were already lobbying Congress for reparations. An alliance was formed between the two, affording both groups greater political influence. But the Aleuts, still invisible to their nation, would have to make their own case.
It was completely different from the Japanese-American experience in the internment camps in World War II. There was no question in anyone's mind about the loyalty of the Aleuts.
In Washington and across the nation, the attitude was conciliatory. No question World War II had been an epic struggle for good, but Vietnam and Watergate had taught that governments make mistakes.
So, President Carter, on July the 31st, 1980, signed into law a bill which established the Commission on Wartime Relocation and Internment of Civilians, with two principal mandates: to consider the claims of the Japanese Americans and to consider the claims of the Aleut people. And so the process began.
From CBS News headquarters in New York, this is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather.
Tens of thousands of them were sent to concentration camps, in the words of...
News around the globe focused on the Japanese-American internment. The Aleut story was a mere footnote, but that hardly mattered. For the first time in U.S. history, Aleuts had a place on the nation's political agenda.
Now, some 40 years after the fact, a federal commission is investigating that dark chapter in the nation's past to seek appropriate remedies.
Today we open our hearings first with concern about the Aleuts.
One of the real leaders in this cause was Philemon Tudiakov.
Yes, thank you for your welcome.
He was a wonderful little man, and yet he was a towering giant of a person. He was effective, he was articulate, and he spoke from the heart.
All right, as U.S. citizens, we're taking the phone.
We had compelling Aleut witnesses that appeared before this very distinguished commission.
Food was hard to come by all during the time you were there. And Mr. Shishnikov says, I don't know how I made it.
And we had the depositions of scores of more of them. And all of this effort caused the commission to recommend back to the Congress, restitution for both the Aleuts and the Japanese Americans.
The commission concluded that the United States had failed its citizens. The government's failure to care was directly responsible for widespread disease and death in the camps and the loss of community and personal property in the Aleuts' villages. The government had, as a matter of simple convenience, limited the Aleuts' personal freedoms, treating them as a herd of animals.
I think that one thing one takes away from this is it's very important to respect the dignity of individuals and to give people the authority to be in charge of their own lives. And I hope that is a core value of this country. And that made what happened in the Second World War to both these groups of individuals important to remember and to learn from.
In the camps, Aleuts' protests had fallen on deaf ears. The commission's report gave them a voice, and Alaska's lawmakers, closely aligned with Japanese American leaders, would provide the political muscle for the coming debate on Capitol Hill.
No one other than the Japanese or Alaska Natives were actually taken from their lives and interned and treated as though they were aliens. Other Americans that were moved out of harm's way were not interned. They were put on islands. They had no ability to leave. They had no ability to work. And they were really totally left in isolation during the period of the war. So I thought they should be compensated, as well as those who were interned as Japanese. We were seeking just simple justice, that's all.
Between 1983 and 1988, 7 different redress measures were introduced in Congress.
Which the clerk will report by title.
Bill to implement the recommendations of the Commission on the Wartime Relocation and Internment of Civilians.
My father instilled in me the injustice of what we did to the Japanese, and that extended to the Aleuts.
That were actually used as slave laborers by the United States government.
It was a very emotional thing for me because it's probably one of the unjust things that have happened during our civilization.
Mr. Rodino is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, today as we celebrate the signing of our Constitution 200 years ago, we have an opportunity to reaffirm that this great document of human liberty applies to all Americans.
We are going to admit that we made a mistake. And I think it is part of a great nation to be able to admit that we made a mistake.
Governments do things wrong, and only democracies have the ability to right those wrongs.
On August 10, 1988, President Ronald Reagan signed Public Law 100-383. The long battle for redress had been won.
This was truly a tremendous achievement. The new law provided for a $5 million trust fund for the benefit of the villagers who had been returned and their descendants. It also provided $1.4 million for restoration of church properties, $15 million for the loss of Aleut Island, and individual payments of $12,000 to those Aleuts who had survived the camps and were still alive at the time the public law became effective.
Thank you all again, and God bless you all. I think this is a fine day.
No amount of money can restore priceless icons that were lost from the churches, or the loss of a loved one due to neglect and disease. No amount of money can compensate for the loss of a traditional village site on Aleut. But it's necessary sometimes to compensate a people for injustices by helping the next generation and the generation thereafter, generations that have been set back by the losses. We have to remember that our country is going to suffer calamities, threats, attacks by foreign enemies. But in the course of these events, we must ensure that the liberties of our individual citizens are not shunted aside in some misguided effort to protect the greater good. The experience of the Aleuts is significant. It's just a few people. It's just a few people. But many of their fundamental rights were ignored or shunted aside in the course of World War II, and we cannot allow